that favorite binky. Every child has their favorite binky. And if it goes missing, it's the end of the world as we know it. And there was one day when we were at the supermarket and we misplaced that favorite binky. Fortunately, Asher hadn't realized it, and we were already out in the car, and so my wife went running back into the supermarket to look for that favorite binky and search diligently until hopefully she could find it so that we wouldn't have many sleepless nights and the end of the world. At least the end of Asher's world. And after a few minutes of me distracting him, trying to make sure that he didn't realize that the binky was missing, Angel, my wife, came running back out with binky in hand, running as fast as she could to try to avert this big crisis that we were facing. And this reminded me of a story that Jesus told. In fact, Jesus didn't teach the crowds anything without using a story. And he said, "Don't despise even one of these little ones." Suppose if there was a shepherd and he was watching 100 sheep and he realized that one of them is missing. Wouldn't he stop everything that he was doing and leave the 99 in the field to go and search diligently for that one lost sheep? And wouldn't he rejoice so much when he found it and rejoice over that one and be more satisfied in that one than in the 99 that never wandered? In the same way, Jesus and God rejoices in one sinner that repents. So, the binky was found, and the crisis was averted. The world didn't end. A simple story with many profound truths that we can think about. But the point is that even in the simplest of conversations, you can incorporate a Bible story. And in fact, Jesus designed his teaching in such a way that they're easier to remember because they're stories and narrative. And we can tell it just like we tell a story from our own lives. This particular story is found in Matthew 18, 10 through 14. But you can do it with any of the parables and any of the stories from the Bible. And so I'd like to tell you how I prepared that story. What I did was I grabbed 5 different translations, and first I read them, and then I told it as many times as I could so that I would remember it and remember the details, remember the outline. But the first step is to take at least 5 translations. And what you want to do is you want to grab some that are more of the literal translations and some that are more paraphrases. And so the way to think about that is different tools for different things. An X-Acto knife is great for certain things, but it's not so great for spreading butter. A butter knife is great for spreading butter and is not so great for other things. So a literal translation is good for in-depth studies, word studies, anything where you want it to be as close to the original language as possible, whereas a paraphrase is better for closer to English, more fluent English, easier to read, um, easier to catch some of the narrative as opposed to being wordy or awkward because it uses generally better English rather than better, well, this is as close to the Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic as possible. And so it's best to pull from both so you have about 2 more literal and 2 closer to paraphrases, and then 1 that's maybe your preferred translation. And that's an easy way to get to 5. So like what I used was ESV, my preferred translation, NIV, NLT, God's Word translation for more paraphrases, and then New King James, and I'm not remembering what's the other more literal translation I used, KJV. But the point is that way you can hopefully get the best of both worlds as you internalize it, and you don't get caught up on any one wording, because if you get caught up trying to remember one word from like a memorized story, then the entire story can fall apart. And that's something you want to avoid. So hopefully you can take some time to look up a parable or any story from the Bible and read it in 5 translations, and then tell it to a friend or someone close to you. Because the first telling is going to be the roughest. When you first tell a story that you're trying to learn, you want to almost just give the outline. Because that way, if you get caught up, you can at least get through the whole story. If you're more familiar with it, you might be able to fill in the details more. But you tell it once from memory, and then you might go to another translation and read it again, or review it in your head and say, okay, what did I forget? And that's the first step to start learning stories on your own and start internalizing God's Word and meditating on it. Now, there's another little rule to storytelling, and that's the rule of 5. It takes 5 times to really get a story all the way down. 5 times from memory. Don't cheat. But the first time is the roughest, and then it gets smoother and smoother and more like a professional presentation. Now, sometimes it takes more, sometimes less, depending on familiarity and that stuff. But a good goal is 5. It's said that after you've told a story 5 times from memory, you'll never fully forget it. Or, as one really good storyteller once said, it's like brushing your teeth. The doctor tells you you don't have to brush all your teeth. You only have to brush the teeth you want to keep. And it's the same way with stories. You don't have to tell every story you learn 5 times to 5 different people, but you have to with the ones you want to keep. Thank you.